welcome to KTAL News Now Live. Today is September 11th, a day that we memorialize and honor a moment that changed our world. When terrorists attacked the World Trade Center in New York City, the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., and Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Today I'm joined by our digital director of content, Marissa Diaz. Marissa was a resident of New York City on that fateful day in our nation's history, and she's joining us today to share her experience on that tragic morning and the days that follow. Thank you, Marissa, for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So, 9/11 was a beautiful, sunny morning. It's one of those days we never forget what was going on a day something like that happened, right? But at 8:46 a.m., everything changed. Share with us what you remember about that moment.
So, living in New York City, it was actually a very beautiful day, very crisp fall day. What I remember is that it was so beautiful. There was no clouds in the sky, and I remember having all my shoes under my desk because you walked to work and you changed your shoes underneath there. And I remember like saying, "Oh my gosh, I have all these shoes here. I don't even need to change them because the weather's so beautiful." It was yeah. And then like you said, Marlo, it all changed in a little bit.
What were some of the reactions, right? I remember me watching from home instantly was disbelief, right? Followed by more disbelief, and then I couldn't believe what I was watching. So for you being there in the city that day, what were some of the reactions that you felt that your friends and neighbors, coworkers?
I think it was a bit of confusion at first because I actually was working in where Madison Square Gardens building is, which is 2 Penn Plaza, which is right above where all the train hubs come in and the subway hubs come in. It's a very compact area, and we had a view site to the World Trade Center. I actually had my college graduation from NYU up in the World Trade Center, and so we used those two staples to guide us home, right? Every day and night, that was sort of like, oh, we're going to go head towards the World Trade Centers. Um, and I think at that point, when all the stuff was happening, people were messaging and saying what's going on, and we were absolutely confused as to what was happening. And we in our building had bird's eye view to the World Trade Center and could see that something was happening, but first initially was, hey, something is going on. We don't know what's going on, but initially it was, oh, a twin engine hit one of the towers, and we're like, oh my goodness, um, what a terrible accident! What's going on? And then as minutes went by, communication, computers, telephones, landlines, everything went down. So it was like out of a movie. Like, 1 minute, my mom from California was trying to call me and trying to text me and instant messaging me. And 1 minute she's like, "What's going on?" And I'm like, "I have no idea what's going on." And she's like, "Make sure you stay with Michelle, one of my best friends. Make sure you stay together." And I'm like, I really don't know what's going on. And then boom, all of a sudden, all communication ceased. And when you think about New York City, and it's sort of like the heartbeat, and things are happening, and it just was a standstill, and nobody knew. I think that was the scariest thing, is that nobody had any clue what was going on, and you couldn't communicate with your loved ones. You couldn't communicate with anybody except for the people you were around. So, um, like you said, it was like everyone has their personal experiences, and everyone was confused, I think, at that point of impact, and the point of hearing all the chronicle of timeline that happened after that.
And talk a little bit about initially not knowing what happened and thinking that it was an accident. How quickly did you all start to learn exactly what had happened and the feeling that you felt, understanding that no, this was not an accident, this was an intentional action?
Yeah, and so we rushed to our lunch area where we could actually see the towers, and again, communication was cut off, and so um, you know we didn't know what was happening. We thought, again, like, we thought it was a twin engine. We did have the capability of watching media and them, you know, trying to help and sort and do what they could possibly do, you know, talking with the FAA and you know, I know George Bush came here. It was crazy because I wasn't even gonna move to Louisiana. I was in New York. So to like look at the timeline, and he came to Barksdale, right? And I said, so, you know, it was such confusion, going from like what happened, going to like the twin engine, what happened, and then all of a sudden you see the other tower hit, and you're like, oh no, 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 no. This is something is going on. We're in trouble. And now we're thinking, okay, we're on the something 30th floor. Like, do we need to evacuate? We're under a huge hub, Penn Station. Like, what do we do? Right? So we didn't know what to do. We were confused. I mean, we saw them, you know, both of the towers on fire, and you couldn't communicate with anybody. You just had the people around you, which when you say, you know, people at your work are really family, at that point it was like, are we going to die, right? Like, are we going to die? What's happening? What's going on? And then I'm imagining my friends and family and other, you know, people in other parts of the United States saying, oh my gosh, people in New York, like, what's going on, right? And I guess like everywhere else, like, what's going on? Because, you know, at that point we had no idea if it was just a single targeted, just these twin towers, or if it was across the nation. So it went from confusion to then like, we're in trouble, and then what do we do? And oh my gosh, what's happening? Like, what's going on here?
So whenever tragedy happens, we'll kind of mark it as before and after, right? Like we here have had like before and after Snowmageddon, New Orleans is before and after Katrina. Tell me about life in New York City immediately after 9/11, because it's such a vibrant city, and I'm just remembering the images of the ash
Yeah.
falling on the city for days after the
Yeah.
attacks, right? Describe for us what life was like after 9/11, immediately after.
Well, you know, all transportation and all planes were ceased, right? Everybody had to land, and it was like nobody could fly, nobody could do anything. But also transportation in the city ceased. So you couldn't take the subway. You could not take the bus. Like, everything shut down. And so at that point, you couldn't get home, right? You had nowhere to go. If you did not live in the city, which we lived in Brooklyn, you could not get home. And then where did you go? So, you know, we figured out what we were going to do. We walked 90 blocks north, and that was scary as well, because you were passing Grand Central Station and, you know, Central Park and like all of these other things. But what I remember coming out of the building was, it was like time had stopped. Taxi drivers had pulled over, everyone was listening to the radio, and it was like you said, like, you know, the hustle and bustle of New York City never stopped. And at that point you're like, wow, everything just freeze. That's what happened, freeze. And we didn't know where to go. We didn't know what to do. We didn't know how to get home. We didn't have any food. You know, we didn't have any water. Whatever you had on your back, you had on your back. And I lived there, obviously previously and thereafter, but I saw a sense of community. I saw a sense of, do you need water? Do you need food? Like, people's restaurant stores were open. It was like everyone came together because of this tragedy, and nobody again knew. Weeks leading after that, you know, some of the hospitals were overwhelmed, and some of them were underwhelmed because of just a tragedy of those buildings falling. And actually, when we evacuated is when we saw one of the towers fall, which was very surreal, because you wouldn't imagine that it could fall. And if you were ever in that building, it was just a monstrosity of this beautiful building that you would never even consider it to fall. And so after the weeks come in, we actually didn't go to work for 2 weeks because there was a lot of bomb threats, and there was a lot of bomb threats on the subway. And I remember getting stuck in the subway for 3 hours, no bathroom, no food, no water, whatever you had on your back, because of threats that were continuously coming in. And it was very surreal. You had, these memorials that were popping up. I remember going to volunteer, and Hillary Clinton was there, and she was visiting the armory, actually, and all the pictures of the people's lives, right? Missing, can't find them. Do you know where they're at? But this sense of camaraderie and the sense of like we're humans, and the sense of like how could this happen to our city was very well alive, which is kind of hard, and when you go to New York City, you may feel like this rush and bustle and I'm on my own time, but that period was very kind-hearted and very cognizant of people's tragedies, and it was just a different New York for a long time after that, because people were hurt. People were wounded that this could happen to our city, and how dare it happen to our nation, and just, it was an eye-opener, really, for, I think, a lot of humans and humanity, that we are humans and we should, lean on each other. So it was quite different.
I know that you are a lover of people, very kind, very gentle spirit, always willing to help. What did you learn about yourself, having gone through that, walked the 96 miles, the total uncertainty, not being able to communicate in a city where you don't have family? Like, what did you learn about yourself in the aftermath?
I think it's, we take each other and life for granted, really, because that morning of 9/11, did I ever think that I would see what I saw? No. Did I feel like I was going to die? Yes. Did I feel like I was never going to talk to my mom again? Yes. It gives you the perspective of, I'm going to cry, sorry. It gives you the perspective of being grateful for the people around you. And, every day is not going to be 100%. And you may not be 100% every day, but it's the perspective of the people around you, the people you associate with, even the people you work with, are family. And it gives you this like gratefulness, and it also like the appreciation of life. Like a lot of people, oh, I'm so sorry. A lot of people, and I still deal with it. Obviously, I'm still dealing with it 20 years later. But it gives you the perspective of being grateful and appreciative of you and your life and breathing, and don't take anything for granted, right? Like, I think that's it, because again, that morning, if you were to tell me that you were going to experience this and live with it for 20 years, because it's always like a 9/11 comes about and I'm like, oh gosh, and I have this like herb in my stomach, right? Because it is like a tragedy, and you saw it and you're a part of it and you live it, and you try like to watch the memorials and you can't, and it's I just appreciate yourself, appreciate your life, don't take things for granted. And yeah, I think I learned a lot that day about humanity, about kindness, about loving people, about trying to forgive, and just living every day to be your absolute best, and not take things for granted, I think is the most important thing. Yeah.
So we are 23 years removed from that tragedy. So much of your life has changed. You're now with us in Louisiana. Have you been back to New York City, and have you seen the memorial that has opened in place of the town?
So yes, I have been back. I've been back multiple times, and it took me a very, very long time to go down to that area, because I used to live in that area. I used to eat and play and hang out in that area. Like, that was sort of our, like, where we hung out. And I went last year, and it took me a long time to get into that memorial and to see those empty fountains, and to just, imagine those massive buildings up there. And I did get to go to the memorial. I had to go by myself because it was, again, I cried. And it's a beautiful memorial. If you've never been there, I suggest you go. That day touched everybody in the nation nation and in the country. And everyone has a story and everyone is touched in a different way. And if you do get a chance to go there, I do recommend you go there. But it did take me, over 20 years to have that sort of urge, or I don't really even know if it's an urge, but just courage, thank you, courage to go in there. And I did cry like a baby, and I had to just breathe. And then there was one point, I was in there for a long time, there was one point where I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't get to finish what I wanted to finish. There's a lot of beautiful exhibits, but I couldn't take it anymore. I had to leave. I felt like I was like choking, and I had enough. So I want to go back there again. I probably will cry again, but I want to finish what I started last year. I just have to go on my own time. And I made sure, like, I went by myself because I had to feel like I had to go by myself to heal. And every year, 20 years later, you obviously see me crying. It's everybody's got their story, but I also, law enforcement and our government and, the presidency at that time, and everybody came together. And I know a lot of people's families were affected by the tragedy, and everyone's got their stories and everyone's got their testimonials, and everybody remembers that day, just maybe a little bit differently. But I think my one thing is, love all your people, and don't take things for granted, because you never know. You never know.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing this. I know that it takes a lot to dig back into those hurtful memories that we have, but those are also the memories that shape us, right? And those are also the things that help us become better, hopefully, right? So thank you, Marissa, for sharing words from our great leader here at KTAL News Digital. Thanks again for sharing, and don't forget to watch KTAL News Now live on Tuesdays and Wednesdays at 1 p.m. when we bring you news of the day or great stories like the one that Marissa just shared. Thank you so much, Marissa. Bye-bye.